This time is 5 o'clock. I'm going to call to order this work session of the Pflugerville City Council on October 10th. Our first item of business is to conduct a presentation on the Planning and Development Services Department. We've got Jeremy Frizzell. Thank you for being with us tonight. What can you tell us about Planning and Development Services?
Did you have a choice to be with us tonight?
Yes, it's always a choice. Every day's a choice. Thank you all for letting me be able to be up here with you all tonight and to be able to highlight the department. I am the Director of Planning and Development Services, Jeremy Frizzell. Robin is our Assistant Director, and Emily is our Assistant City Manager. Planning and Development Services consists of the planners, development engineers, GIS team. We have our building inspectors, admin staff, and our environmental inspector. So I want to take a minute just to go through. I'll show you some pictures of who those folks are and who are the people that are doing all the work that you see. Also try and highlight some of the accomplishments. A PowerPoint presentation by me is not going to it's not going to do them justice for all of the work that they do and all of the great things that they do. So bear with me on that. But I would like to start with our administrative staff. If it wasn't for these folks right here, these 5 ladies, all of the development that you see happening in town, all of the houses, all of the buildings, all of the things that are happening in a private development, that wouldn't happen. These are the ladies that are at the front line that are taking all the calls, taking all the emails, processing all of the permits, taking all of that brunt end stuff that comes through and fielding that. And so I want to highlight them. Didi Martinez is there on the right on the picture, and she's our Development Services Coordinator. Amazing lady. She has got a lot of work. She's got a great staff, but she does a tremendous job, and just want to highlight her and give her kudos on it. On the screen there are the planners. Our planning manager is Nathan Jones. He's newer to our group.
Has a pretty impressive mustache.
Yeah, absolutely. And he leads our
kind of
current
looks
planners.
like a superhero.
Pretty much is. Pretty much is. But all of
Can you stand up and
He's really
let's
good at turning
do
red.
this thing? Make sure there's not a superhero outfit under that jacket.
Thank you for being here to represent.
So Nathan is amazing, and he's doing a great job. He's taking lead over the current planners, and they're the ones that are reviewing all the site plans, zoning applications, subdivision applications, fielding all those calls. And there on the screen is all of the planners that we have: Michael and Kristen, Sammy and Zainab. So want to make sure that you all see them and know who is behind the scenes when you see all the staff reports and all the things that are happening in and around the area. They're the ones that are reviewing the plans and really making this stuff happen. Erin Sellers is on the left side there. She's been with the city for a long time. She's our innovation strategist, and so she's our long-range planner. She's always done an excellent job of leading the charge. All the master plans she's touched. She's recently worked on things like the SH45 small area plan, working with them and the developers and trying to get some kumbaya there. She's worked on things like the downtown streetscape master plan, been able to get that started, and we're still working through that process. She's also working on the public art projects. So there's just some quick highlights of some of the things that are going on. We couldn't do it without people like that and focused on the long-range folks, long-range projects. On the screen now is our engineering staff. These are development engineers, and so these are the ones that are running through, again, reviewing the development applications and then also making sure that everything that gets constructed is done correctly and to all of our design standards. We have two new development engineers, Samson and Alondra. They're brand new to the city within this year. We're missing one still. We're out there looking for a principal engineer and interviews right now. But that team that's listed there is managed by Gordon Hawes. He's our engineering manager. we have 3 construction inspectors. They're the ones that are out making sure that all of those connections are done accurately, and then 2 environmental inspectors to make sure that, again, we're in compliance. On the screen represents some of the work that's been going on, the development applications that have happened this year. You can see that the large percentage of development applications are mostly with the site plans this year. We also have a large amount of right-of-way permits that come through our division, and so those are things that are installing utility lines for private entities. The subdivision applications are reflected in the bar graph on the left-hand side. Orange represents the final plats, while the gray represents the construction plans and blue are preliminary plans. If you recall, the subdivision process starts with a preliminary plan, then moves into final plat and construction plans. You can see over the course of time how those things start to increase and they start to decrease, and that shows the ebb and flow of development activity that's happening as projects are moving through the process. On the right-hand side is a line graph of site development applications, and so you can see that we're continuing to have that increase in site development, which is reflective of, if you drive around, you see all of the activity that's happening. Construction active projects is listed on the screen there, and those are representative of the projects that our construction inspectors are out reviewing and making sure that, again, those are being constructed to the correct standards, as well as our environmental staff.
What's a disturbance permit?
Site disturbance is when they're doing some grading. They're out moving the land. It's generally at the very beginning of a stage of a development process, if they just needed to do some clearing or get ready for actual construction. This is just a quick list of some of the notable projects that are going on in town. They're either in the process, we're in some sort of review, they've been through Planning and Zoning Commission, haven't made it to you yet. There's some that are on there that, like HEB, it's under construction right now and moving, so it's a pretty substantial type of project. A lot of multifamily projects coming through, and so we're seeing that activity and those reviews in the site development.
And by Heatherwild, the second to last one there, we're talking about the development that's ongoing on the west side of Heatherwild.
That's correct.
As you approach Wells
Yes.
Branch.
So there's an apartment project that you see that's under construction, almost finished, on the left-hand side, and south of that kind of draw area, that will be additional apartments that will be going into there.
Okay.
Just a quick reminder that pflugervilletx.gov/maps is where you can go and see all the development activity. That would be all of the different applications that have come through and things that are being reviewed, but then also all of the things that are under construction. This is something that our team, our GIS team, is putting together, and it reflects all of the things that we see. So if you ever have a question of what's going on, what's in the pipeline, what are we looking at, you can always go to that pflugervilletx.gov/maps to be able to see what's happening.
Jeremy, I've noticed over time, a number of times, that there's a substantial gap between our estimate and the census estimate. Why is there a difference, and why is our number better than their number?
So our number is pulling off of building permits and more of a real-time type of number, whereas theirs is waiting.
So their number is a year behind, 2 years behind?
It's a few years behind.
Several years behind.
Can we make a suggestion? Because he's right. The lack of cohesiveness regarding the application or utilization, probably a better word is utilization of the formula to calculate that, even internally, has been interesting. So can we make sure that all across all our departments, that we utilize that as our fulcrum, because it does catch us awry, because we'll be in public and we'll talk about things and they're like, no, you only have 60,000 or 65,000 people. We're like, we wish we only had 65,000 people. We're like, no, it's not even close to that.
108 in our jurisdiction.
Yeah.
These are some of the notable projects and plans that are also being worked on this year. We looked at the Unified Development Code amendments. We worked through Downtown Streetscape Master Plan, as I mentioned. Transit Development Plan was recently approved. Fetch a Ride. CDBG streetlight project is something that we're also continuing to work with Encore on and looking to be able to get that project moving in our western side. Some of the environmental highlights, again, things that the environmental inspectors are looking at is out in the field as development is occurring. They're also out sampling the creeks to make sure, sampling Gilliland Creek to make sure that the water quality is sufficient and meets the requirements.
Have we had any air quality problems? I know
No.
in the past there were some water quality problems, but
Yeah,
that's
no,
in the
we
behind
continue to
us.
monitor the air quality and actually looking to add another monitor this year.
And does
But-
that have to do with ozone action days, or what?
Right,
What's
we
the, what,
wanna-
what are the air quality issues? Are it bad air coming in from Austin, or are we generating a lot of local pollution?
Yeah, local pollution doesn't seem to be very high right now. But within the MSA, yes, we do. We are receiving higher amount of air pollution within the area. And so we've been asked to help participate and do some of the monitoring and watch that. That's something that we do participate in, that Clean Air Coalition. And that's a group that is monitoring the efforts and monitoring EPA and what are the standards, and then looking to local jurisdictions to see if there are changes that we can do or looking for support.
Okay, so everybody obviously wants clean air. We're not generating a lot of pollution locally, but we're monitoring the pollution that comes through
That's coming
the
through.
area.
That's
Okay.
correct. Our GIS staff is led by Sven Griffin. He's our GIS manager, and all of the cool maps and things that you see that are out on the website are coming through the GIS group. They're definitely innovative in all of the things that they're coming up with. We're moving into a new permitting software system. They've also been making sure that all the different departments have access to dashboards and finding ways and creative ways to be able to track their data and to be able to share that information. And so they've done a lot of work this year, especially in this PLL permitting system that just kicked off yesterday, and we're working through that. Applicants are now able to go in, developers are able to go in and log in their information. This is what it looks like on their portal, and then on our side, how it comes into us. We're then able to match up and track the data. We'll be able to share that information across departments, and also be able to take the electronic payments and move that into that system. So
Tell us a little bit more about the bottom line with the PLL system. My understanding is that it dramatically increases transparency and ease of use of the permitting system. Am I wrong?
yes, that is correct. And so what this will do is enable us to be able to, in real time, update our maps, update different applications, dashboards we'll be able to create. So information that comes in we'll be able to share. And so we just need to play with it, receive the information, and see what other options that we have to be able to share with the public, the different types of applications that are coming in.
As we're doing that and transitioning to this, are any projects being inhibited by it, or as the migration goes on, or how's that going?
So last week was a week where we had to go through a transition between our last permitting program into our new permitting program. So that was one week where folks were not able to submit their applications, just because we had to be able to migrate, and if we didn't stop it, there would be data that would be sitting over on the other side, not easy to move over. But what we're going to do is work with that community development community to make sure that their applications are coming in today. We had a lot of phone calls, and we were working with everybody today. So yeah, so far it's been really good.
Were there any problems with adoption that you didn't foresee, or has it just been smooth sailing the whole way through?
I would say that right now, that from the day that we've been operating, we're able to navigate the system in a efficient way.
Great.
Yeah, and our staff has done a really great job of making sure that the workflows and all of that were in place before we got into the system. They also went through, made sure that there was good good collaboration and communication to the different groups. So the building department came out and provided presentations to the starts groups that were looking to do all of the different building permits to make sure that they were aware of the transition. Our planning group also did similar things. We've shared with them how they go about creating their app accounts, and then there to be with them as they move through it. So our building inspectors, Robert Blanco is our building official, and then we have our newest building inspector is Michael Acey. He's Inspector 2. We lost one, but Michael has been able to step in and is doing a great job. Between the four of the inspectors, they've done on average 2,200 monthly inspections. Monthly permits is at 241. They have an average pass rate of 69.5%. What Robert would tell you is that if you have a pass rate that's too high, that means that maybe somebody's not looking at something. If you have a pass rate that's too low, maybe they're looking a little too hard and too tough on folks. And so that's what our group is always wanting to do, is to make sure that the building permits and inspections are done equitably and efficiently, but making sure that it's safe.
So how does that pass rate compare to the industry average?
I would say that it's right on, if not better.
Okay.
This graph shows how the commercial permits are coming through this year. They're increasing. That's reflective of the development that you see out there. The residential permits continue to decline. Those are the single-family residential developments. We just don't have a lot of those new developments in place yet. But as you saw in prior slides, with the subdivision process, we start with the preliminary plans, then move into final plats and construction plans. So the preliminaries are increasing. But for new single-family neighborhoods, we're not really seeing a lot of those coming into the pipeline right at the moment. Looking at ETJ subdivisions is probably the next one.
I was about to say, but as compared to the rest of the region, this is pretty good.
Yeah.
So this is not just something for Pflugerville, but it's been pretty good aspect.
Yeah, and market trends with inflation, with supply issues that we ran into, those types of things also had input into that.
Now, Jeremy, we know that there have been some limitations placed on the ability of cities to annex areas nearby to them in the last few years by the legislature. But can you explain how that affects our permitting process? Do we have a permitting process that affects properties in the ETJ or beyond?
So if they're in a municipal utility district, as an example, that would be something that could be negotiated inside of a consent agreement to require them to do building permits. Other than that, ETJ development does not require a building permit.
Okay. So to the extent that properties are being built in the Pflugerville ETJ or even beyond the Pflugerville ETJ, there'd be increased residences in the area, but we wouldn't be seeing any impact in terms of our residential permits that would be issued.
That's correct. Yep.
Well,
Okay.
I'm sorry, let me make sure I'm clear on that. In the neighborhood development, most of these places that are within I'm not aware of any neighborhoods that are being developed outside of the city limits in the ETJ without some sort of district. So do these numbers here reflect basically most of the single-family residential development in the ETJ?
Yeah, well, this is all of the development that's occurring that we're issuing the permits on with regards to other development in the ETJ. I'm not aware of significant subdivisions or anything like that that's occurring outside of districts at this point. And part of that's going to be based on utility services.
Well, that's why you have
Yeah.
a district.
Right. So
I did notice one of your earlier slides, you had I believe the preliminary plats were about double what they were the year prior, and that then typically translates to an increased number of residential permits. Should we expect to see this trend upward based on that number?
So the number of preliminary plans that are subdivisions that are in review that have been in review are pretty much in final plating stage for residential, which would be like the Grove, like Grove of Blackhawk, which is north of Seal. Those are some of the residential neighborhoods that would be coming in. Preliminary plans for new single-family developments. Other than Meadowlark Preserve, yeah, I'm not really thinking of a lot of residential subdivisions. We have the Carmel East preliminary plan is something that's been in review. The Blackhawks, Meadowlark. Other preliminaries are going to be more of the commercial developments.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then you think that the trend here on residential permits probably stays steady or consistent?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think we may steady that. It has continued to decline the past couple of years. So,
Well, I mean,
but I think with the I'm sorry with
no. I was just saying to his point, though. I mean, that's the market right now. Is, what are you able to do? What are you able to, make pencil? For that right there, they're still going to make their pro forma, and I have the full expectation, which is he's hinting at, is that it's going to increase in the future with that. But right now, we're in one of those lulls because there's only 3 cities in our 6-county region that had positive residential growth year over year. It was Lockhart, it was Cedar Park, and it was Pflugerville. So, I mean, we're doing well compared to the rest of the Maine. It's just that right now we're in a lull. And given, to your point, which you keep hinting at as well, David, at the ETJ and all the growth we still have. I always tell people we're like halfway through our life cycle of what this city is going to look like. Like we're like Round Rock in like the mid 80s right now because we have so much land and everything else from there as well. Now the laws that come in place are going to make it a little interesting to see how that growth actually comes about. But I'm with Doug. The full expectation of it's going to keep going because if you want to live in Travis County, you want to have green spaces. One of the few places you're going to have.
Yeah, and I should recant some of that too. The mud districts just east of Hottie and north of Seal. There's a tremendous amount of homes that are in there. That's 3,500 houses or something like that in the Teeman muds, and then there's additional muds that are out 973 quadrant New Sweden. There's 3 different muds there that are significant in size. So we will see an increase in the number of permits that will come through. But I was thinking of like brand new subdivisions that are outside of that. Yeah.
Now, to the Mayor Pro Tem's point, though, there are some cities that are dealing with unwanted growth in areas because of the new annexation laws or de-annexation laws, and that's happening at around 130. And I think that's going to have a domino effect about what the actual product and what it looks like on 132 as well. We're glad we're not there yet, but it's literally happening as we speak.
So we have a pretty exceptional team. Again, my little PowerPoint presentation can't give it justice, but this team works really hard, and they put in countless number of hours to try and make sure that the community is developing in the way that the city wants to see it grow through its comprehensive plan and through the direction that you all provide to them. Some of the things that we're looking forward to is looking at mobility plan update this year. So that would be an update to the transportation master plan, as well as looking at with the trails, looking at downtown east development, doing a comprehensive review of the Unified Development Code, looking at Fetch a Ride program, which has been an exceptional program. It's taken off. It's actually grown quite well at quite a clip, and so we need to watch and see how much that program continues to grow organically, if you will, with that word, and where we can add, additional things. So we do want to have, we're continuing to monitor that, but looking for opportunities there for that program to be able to move it forward. Continuing on with our testing of Gilliland Creek, looking at opportunities for training, increasing the number of CFM, certified floodplain managers on our team to make sure that the city again is safe and developing nice. don't think I know I'm missing things, but I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to be able to come and highlight them and all the work that they're doing, and happy to answer any questions that you have.
What are those trophies for?
Those are amazing trophies. Those are trophies we're retaining. So that's our end of the year. We won the laser tag, and we
I like how he said, and those are trophies we're retaining.
yes we
Wow.
won. We beat everybody.
A challenge set.
And basketball. Yep.
Impressive.
Cheaters. I know. Yeah. No, those trophies are staying. So.
Jeremy, I'd like to go back and touch a little bit more on the Fetch a Ride program. Councilman McDonald and Emily and some of our consultants did just a fabulous presentation about that at the TML conference this last week. We got a lot of very positive response from other cities. I think, frankly, this is, I don't have super wide experience, but it seems to me this is the best public-private partnership program I've ever seen. From the rollout to the implementation to the cute little mascot. I mean, this thing has got everything going for it, and it seems like something that other cities are going to want to emulate. What are we doing in terms of presenting this program and its successes to other cities, both in the Central Texas area and all over the state, so that they can emulate what your department has done so well?
So they do reach out. Emily has been very instrumental at providing those presentations. She gets calls and requests to come out, and does an amazing job.
It's definitely beyond Central Texas. I've got a call today.
Yeah, and they are.
Rudy looked up one of our speakers at TML, looked up their speaker's fee. We can work something out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you can charge that much? Emily can charge at least half of that.
Emily's worth it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you all.
All right. Jeremy, I'm going to ask you to not go anywhere. We're going to move 2B to the a little bit later. We're going to go ahead and hop to 2C. Discussion regarding tools and potential policies and procedures related to city growth and incorporation of territory within the city's extraterritorial jurisdiction. Jeremy, welcome back. Emily Barone, thank you for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you, and Mayor Pro Tem, if I might, just real quickly on the last item, I'm very proud of the Planning and Development Services Department, but one award that Jeremy, I know, just slipped his mind. They were just found out they were awarded the Planning Excellence Award by APA. This is the 11th time this department has received this award, and they join just a handful of other cities in the state of Texas.
That's great.
All right, so Serena, I have a suggestion. So when we were doing our introductions at one of our meetings at TML, they said that they were the city of champions. So I'd like for us to get an 11-time banner up. I'll go ahead and make sure we have fur paintings right there as well.
In a blue bonnet field.
In blue bonnet
In a
field.
blue book.
Excellent job. That's great.
Thank you. So for this item, this was an item requested by council for discussion about our ETJ and our plans for growth in that area. It's a very complicated discussion. Jeremy and I have put some slides and some information together, pulled some from legal as well as PD in hopes that we can start this conversation, some of the discussions that we've been having over time, and also seek feedback from the council regarding your ideas and thoughts for how we move forward in this very challenging legal time with the additional legislative restrictions that have been put on cities across the state related to annexation and growth. So we'll start the conversation with some of the goals, policies, and action items that were adopted last year in the Aspire 2040 plan. These were to look at our key corridors. We've mentioned 973 many times. You see that reflected in the comprehensive plan as well as our transportation master plan. And so you see the land uses along that corridor reflective of that type of growth and desired development patterns. leveraging different financing tools, which would include our special districts like municipal utility districts, public improvement districts, and those types of incentives for developers to develop there, also giving us the opportunity to look at development regulations in collaboration with those developments. Here's some of the additional policies that were included in there, and there's a few more. They all did make it on the screen, but just not on my printout. To further the conversation like we're having today, looking at those agricultural patterns, I recall during the Aspire 2040 plan, and the feedback we got was to not lose our agricultural heritage. So you see that in our most further ETJ, some of that preservation, but you see the growth patterns and development as we get towards that 973 corridor to become more dense and responsive to development. And lastly, here's some of the action items. Some of these that we've begun working on, which is review of our special district policies that's related to MUDs and PIDs, as I mentioned, minimizing the potential negative impacts of growth and prepare for development of future annexation. Again, our conversation tonight, and we'll show some of the MUDs and their fiscal reports that they have to kind of show some of the debt that they currently have in place in those, and why it also makes annexation of those areas additionally challenging. We work through those with strategic partnership agreements, which are agreements that allow us to, in the future, annex certain districts. Also with the 2040 plan, here's a snapshot of our ETJ and really everything east of 130 of what that future land use looks like. And so you see the yellow tones are really your residential to the mixed use and the peach. As the colors get deeper, the hotter pink and the red, that really becomes the retail mixed use and higher density commercial areas.
So as we start talking about annexation, some of the things that we have to take into consideration is all the impacts of the legislation and what are those pieces. And so previously we would have been able to unilaterally go out and annex properties, but then rules changed. And so we were not able to do that. We then started proceeding with 3-year annexation plans. That changed. We then went into having conversations with folks about development agreements, and so we would offer a development agreement prior to them being considered for annexation. So we do have a number of those non-annexation development agreements, and I'll show you a map of that in just here in a minute. Then legislation is also adjusted again, and so then we go into not able to really annex property other than if we're going through petitions or going through voter approvals. And that's kind of where we're at right at the moment. But one of the newest legislation pieces that's come on is that then folks that are in our ETJ can then also say, nope, I don't want to be there anymore. And so, yeah, deuce, we are out. Sorry.
Go ahead.
And so we have one of those items that's on the agenda tonight. I just want to show you a map of where that particular item happens to lie. There's only one at this point that's been received by the city and that was found to be meet all of the different criteria requirements that are inside of that legislation. But this is one of those pieces that we will need to work through and to determine what that impact is to us, because that will cause essentially a hole in the future central portion of the city limits. Question on like ETJ and developments and what is it that we're doing, how are we navigating things. Really we're at the mercy of a landowner filing a petition for annexation. If a landowner has a non-annexation development agreement on their property and they want to do something with it, that then triggers the opportunity for annexation in those situations. That was what was written inside of those agreements initially when we went and had the conversation with them. They wanted to retain their ag exemption and the ability to have that. And we said, that's fine, we won't annex you, but at time that you want to come into this, to do something different, that's the time that we can do that. Some of the other things are just looking at our consent agreements for municipal utility districts. We have existing districts that are in place right now, and so that dictates already what will happen over in those particular areas. Special district opportunities for master planning, that's one of those situations where, again, if you have somebody that's interested in doing something on their property, say they control a large number of acres, the consent agreements allow you to have the opportunity to have the conversation. And so you can make sure that comprehensive plan elements may be able to be retained in there. Most of the agreements that we have in place right now, again, New Sweden, the Black Hawk developments, those type of developments are largely residential. But there could be opportunities for doing some commercial pieces again. Last thing I just want to mention is that we're also doing coordination for regional wastewater systems. And so as these different developments are going out and are coming alive out in the ETJ, they're needing to find ways to have that wastewater. And so they're reaching out to our public works group, wanting to find out how do we navigate that. And so that communication is occurring right now. We're making sure that there could be some incremental plans until the wastewater plant is on board in the future. This is a map that I was mentioning that we have non-annexation agreements on. The ones that are hatched are those that are properties that have that agreement associated with it. So again, if somebody was interested in doing a development out on their property, this would be one of those things that we would say, okay, but you're changing that, and so now you're subject to annexation, provided that they're contiguous. This is another map that also shows you where the different districts are within our ETJ. So everything that is blue with that hatching represents a piece of land that has a MUD probably on it, municipal utility district. The areas that are in red hatching is a MMD, which is a municipal management district. That was something that was created by the legislation years back. It's a little different than a MUD, but similar in concept. It's a special district.
What makes it different, Jeremy?
I think it was by its creation itself.
Okay.
Its actual law.
Just the tool by which it was created.
Yeah.
Cool. My understanding is it an MMD that can collect levy sales
Tax, yes.
and that includes in areas not just in city limits but in the ETJ.
That's correct, I believe. And yes, the blue ones are also just all of our existing municipal utilities.
Okay. So one of the complicated factors of annexing a MUD, for example, would be the amount of debt that MUD has taken on since its creation in order to fund the infrastructure, the water, wastewater, roadways within that MUD. So that is passed on to the residents in those MUDs through the taxes that they pay, and they're paid off over 30 to 40 years. And so here, we're happy to provide this in the weekly. I know it's kind of small up there, but this is a list of our MUDs and their current debt. And you can see that most of them still have millions of dollars in debt, with the first call for these coming in 2030. So,
And Emily, let's be clear. They can continue to issue debt. There's nothing that's stopping them from issuing.
Correct.
We have it at this flashpoint, but it could be more debt that
up to the cap listed in their MUD.
Yeah.
Up to the cap that's been authorized.
Yes.
And that we authorized to begin with. Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
in the beginning.
Yeah. And so that's an additional factor. If we were to say, through a strategic partnership agreement, say we wanted to pursue annexation of a district today, we would then have to negotiate that with them to take on potentially that additional debt and pay that, because currently those residents are paying that through their taxes to pay off that debt to the municipal utility district.
Real quick, this gets a little confusing because I know we've got Carmel on there, but Carmel has, I believe, both an in-city and an out-of-city MUD.
It does.
And Falcon Point, they're the one at the top, is already an in-city MUD. We might want to focus on the ones that are in the ETJ. Oh, you
Correct.
do have the column for that, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But the entirety of MUD 23 with 150, 160 million in capacity, is that all in-city? That seems like an awful lot of debt capacity for an in-city MUD.
I'll confirm that with our financial advisor. They help us put this together. But I believe that's correct. And this chart was updated just a week and a half ago.
Okay, so
then,
there's
so
another
we'll
Carmel there
confirm
at the
that.
bottom with another 130 million. And
Did we have any rhyme?
Authorized.
I know this is before y'all's time, but did you find a pattern, rhyme, or reason regarding how much we authorized them up to? Oh, I heard a snicker.
We don't.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I understood what you said about annexing that area. We might have to take that debt on, but by annexing a MUD, does the MUD district automatically dissolve, or is that tax still levied?
It's dissolved and they take on the city tax rate.
Okay.
And so those then go to city services, not the debt.
And that's required.
Right, that's part of the annexation. There are options in strategic partnership agreements to go through limited districts, which add additional complication to it, which I'll have Charlie help me out with, but we have a slide that kind of show the options in going through a SPA for how you annex it. But it's also how it's set up in the creation of the MUD for the ability to levy that debt payment back to them.
So a million years ago, meaning back in the early 90s, the city of Waxahachie had annexed lake property, right? And they built the Lake Waxahachie. And when they annexed the property, they built it along the confines of the lake, right? Geographic lines, whatever. My house, and then there was a water district that they had, a little well out there that a buddy of mine had drilled and had water lines going to maybe 100 houses, 130 houses. We kept complaining about not being in the city. The city limits literally went right through my house on a diagonal line, through my lot. And so when the city straightened everything up and realigned to go along with the developments that had occurred out there, I got a letter. And the letter said that we were being annexed. Now, this is before the thing, SB 4 or 6, whatever. But the letter said that I basically had three options. My proportional amount of the debt was, at that time, it seemed like a lot, $1,400. And I can either write a check for that or make 12 equal payments to the city to pay off my portion of that debt. We can't do that anymore, is what I'm hearing? Or is that part of this, a SPA or some more limited agreement that you're talking about?
I imagine that was how that district and then their annexation agreement with the city was set up. I'd lean to Charlie on kind of the variety of factors that we could utilize for that.
There's any number of reasons why it was done that way. It doesn't sound like it was a municipal utility district. It sounds like it was.
There's like some private.
Yeah. So I have no. I can't begin to guess on how that was set up or back in the 90s and what the authority was and how it was done that way. Flash forward to today, though, statutorily with respect to municipal utility districts and water control and improvement districts, we're pretty limited in how we do it and what we can and cannot charge to property owners for purposes of the debt.
So let me ask a more specific question then, while we're on this topic. So if we look at a MUD district and there's, $1 million, $10 million, whatever, there's a fixed amount of debt. And we have some way of proportionally allocating that debt to each homeowner, whether it's by the square foot of the property, number of LUEs, whatever, right? There is a process for proportionally, equitably distributing that debt to each household. As part of the annexation, can we then do the same thing in terms of writing them a letter and saying, hey, we've got this annexation agreement, we're annexing your property, you have two choices, or three choices, right? 12 equal payments, 24 equal payments, or one lump sum payment, whatever. Can we approach these annexations that way so the debt doesn't necessarily become distributed across the entire city? It stays within the folks that
No.
We cannot.
No.
Is there any way to convert a MUD to a PID such that we could?
I'm not aware of one, but that doesn't mean it's not
Okay.
possible.
And my understanding also on this topic is that there was a case that I believe went to the Supreme Court, so there may be some legal basis there in the judicial branch that said in many cases this conversion from an out of city to an in city, the annexation of a MUD is double taxation, and then that was just. And I think, Mr. Rogers, you may have had some experience with that one.
I was actually counsel to the Northwest Austin MUD number 2 that brought that case. My understanding, however, I am no longer counsel to that MUD, and my understanding is that the legislature rewrote the law after that Texas Supreme Court decision. So I'm not sure what the current status is on that.
Some of the other factors to think about, other than the debt of a district, would also be the assets that they contain within those districts. And so here's some just examples of detention ponds that they maintain, wet ponds, perimeter landscape lots, amenity centers with neighborhood level swimming pools carved out, those different kinds of factors, things that we would have to take on if they are district owned amenities within there. So for example, here's Northeast Travis County Utility District. Outlined here, you can see detention ponds, wet ponds, drainage lots, perimeter drainage, and utility lots. These are all areas owned by the district that upon annexation would become the city's for ownership and maintenance.
Are there some benefits to the city?
In these,
Depends on how you look at it.
That's your response.
Yeah.
So my high level understanding is that a municipal utility district pays for the infrastructure up front instead of that ending up in the cost of the house. So it's in theory, a tax advantaged way for a homeowner to pay off portions of the
Yeah.
the infrastructure. That being said, with the way housing prices are now with our impact fees, I don't know how. That's always a balance for me, right? How valuable is the actual creation of a MUD it's not really tax advantaged anymore thanks to our increased standard deductions and decreased salt levels. So it's a balance. I guess my question is, why would we approve a MUD in the future versus requiring annexation?
So for MUDs recently,
Great question.
we've thought about this differently than many of these were approved many, many years ago.
Yeah, we know.
When we were excited about development and needed this in. And so now we look at these a little bit differently, where we push to have the HOAs have that longevity for maintenance and operation of these types of facilities, so that we don't then take on the ownership and maintenance once they are annexed into the city.
And I want to give you a lot of credit for that, because the M&O, we know that's a long-term issue, right? Hey, you have these great landscape, great parks, everything else that's going on from there. But we already found out through, a perfect example is 1849 Park. Wait a minute, okay, we have to have the applicable FTEs to actually go ahead and take that. And if we're going to take that as the lifetime of ownership, well, okay, that's even further harsh on that as well. To Doug's point, it's always, I've talked to plenty of developers about this, because, they rail on me at times about saying, hey, no, we're just why we want to do PIDs because we want people to actually, hey, listen, this is the debt, this is what they're owed, it's not going to change, and once that's paid off, it's paid off from there as well. Their argument is that, this tool's still a tool that, is well respected, well utilized, and they've had for an elongated period of time. I don't know if that's necessarily a good enough argument to say, okay, listen, that means that an old dog can't learn new tricks on something like this.
No, whether it's rolled into the mortgage or it's rolled into taxes or it's rolled into a PID, it's all coming out of the same pocket, right? The tax advantaged nature of it being a taxing district is very much reduced in this day and age.
And again, we're the ones who are stuck with, this is why I really was glad that you showed that slide about the debt, with the people who come to us saying, why aren't you annexing us? And we're saying, why aren't you talking to your MUD about the issue and the debt that they're issuing right now? And they only control, it's up to their boards about issuing that more and more debt and what we can do.
Right. The other thing I just want to point out about MUD or utility districts that have these types of amenities is that once we annex them, we also want to make sure that our parkland is equitable, and how we maintain and treat them are equitable across each neighborhood. And so some of these become used to a higher standard of landscaping, or they like, certain flowers all year round. Well, that's not something that we do. We ensure that it's equitable across the board once they're coming to the city. One of the other challenges that we found with some of these older districts is that they will be a party to properties that are outside of their district. And so that also kind of makes it a little more challenging when looking at these.
Expand on that.
And so for like this particular example, Lakeside WCID number 1 is a new amenity center and pool under construction, but they participate. That is also partially their amenity center for their neighborhood. And so they're contributing to that from their district as well as the adjacent district. And so they have debt issued for that. And so that's also got to be paid off, making it a little more challenging when you've got property outside of the boundaries of that district.
Interesting. Because I'm guessing in that instance, even if in fact, hey, we're annexing y'all, they're still going to be owing debt, paying that debt toward those other properties because they've actually
They
gone in and
contributed.
helped, yeah, for those properties.
So
And we
a bit
can't
of a
stop
poison
that.
pill
Yeah,
almost.
that's not confusing.
No. Oh, and then strategic partnership agreements or SPAs, which is allowed this through Chapter 43. Just some options to look at when we consider annexation of these districts would be a limited purpose annexation, which does allow you to collect sales and use taxes and can regulate the use of property. To full purpose annexation, which would be fully in the city limits like we have any of our other properties. A limited district, which is a district that still owns and maintains those parks, recreation, and open spaces. Generally, their 10-year terms and potentials for automatic renewals. And then you can dissolution of those districts after those terms expire. And so those are things we would have conversations with those MUD boards through conversations in establishing strategic partnership agreements. Many of our districts refer to them, but not, I think we have one that actually established a SPA at the time of consent. One of the other things we consider when looking at the ETJ is the services that are required to be provided once we annex those properties. And so while it's contingent too on roads and utilities that we would take on, just an example for PD, their current calls for service are 7.5 minutes through those two different, I think you see they're in red and blue. We would need additional improved roads, and without those, we would anticipate that any additional annexation or extension into the ETJ would call for additional police officers, potentially an additional police station, and those kind of things in order to maintain the service levels that we see in our city today well into the future.
The only, can you flip back to that one
Sure.
second? The only pushback I would have is that, I mean, for people like I used to be as far east as you could be while being in the city. Now I'm
Little
too
bit
back
further.
yeah, from that. You're still driving through ETJ to get to a response time to something that happens in my neighborhood. So, I mean, I do understand that you're right. Okay, you want to respond, but that's already happening because we are driving through that. Now, the improvement of the roads, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
and I want to give this council credit. I will keep saying it. And I apologize again. I should have pushed for it back in 2019 when y'all put it up for their Seal Road. Like, we know that's a hot mess, and and it's only going to continue to be hot mess with everything else coming online with that. But part of it is that they're driving through those areas, their ETJ. And that's why, and honestly, that's what gets our ETJ folks so upset because they're like, "How are you in the city?"
But
and
we're
then,
not.
yeah,
Yeah.
out here.
And so then it's just thinking about kind of that leapfrog effect too, that if we go to like
Yeah.
the 973 corridor, but we haven't made improvements to the roads in between, but we're still required to service those properties
Great point.
along that corridor.
But then again, if we do make the improvements to those roads in between, but the vast majority of the development there is not paying taxes that support those roads, it also becomes an undue and inequitable burden on the rest of our citizens.
We call that the Kelly Lane conundrum.
Of course, and that does bring about the scenario. If these areas do become annexed, they bring with them ad valorem value. They bring with them a certain amount of tax revenue, tax collection that hopefully supports the services and the infrastructure required. I mean, I've always had my own rule of thumb that residential tends to be subsidized by commercial. Are we still seeing that trend, given I'm going to say the affordability issues that we're having with home prices? The housing has certainly increased dramatically. Is residential tax collections supporting residential services?
We believe that they're not. However, we are pursuing a fiscal impact study so that we can put a number to that to show the city services provided and the land use related specifically to our ETJ so that you can make a more informed decision on annexation or ETJ management.
So in that scenario, then, I mean, that's the balance, right? Do I want no more MUDs. I want everyone in city limits, but all of a sudden that means that our taxes have to go up because we have to support more services for more residential. Or do I prefer to leave everything in the ETJ, go ahead and let them make a MUD, and then I don't have to provide services, but they're still driving on our roads. They're still driving through the town. They're still consuming some of those ancillary services that are funded by taxes. That's always a real difficult balance.
It is.
Well, and I mean, and that's why, again, what other tools like PIDs and other aspects that we can use for that? Because you're right. Like if we're looking at them, we have to take that balance about, okay, yeah, you're not paying our taxes over here, but you sure are contributing to, our traffic, our infrastructure, our roadways, all the issues over here as well. What are we going to do about that? Utilizing tools where we have I still think in the end, a net end, or an end game. I'm thinking of Avengers, sorry. An end game for these folks regarding, hey, listen, we know by this date, this will be paid from here as well. Let's have a conversation about what that looks like in the city. I mean, and in many of those places, just like you said, they're going to be far in the future for that, but at least it allows future councils to not inhibit the growth of this. Because outside of us just going buck wild and redoing the whole entire legislature and redoing all the whole infrastructure right there as well. I mean, we're working in these rules, and one of the things that even our state reps and our senators constantly tell me is that they're not going to get any better. So what are we doing now? Because they're not going to get any better anytime soon to try to go and contribute to that. You were trying to say something, and I think I felt like I cut you off. A while. It was like 5 minutes ago.
Well, that's okay. You had a long point to make. I have a question in terms of the balance of services, which I think is something that Kim was getting to a little while ago. What's the advantage for them to be in the city in terms of, presumably they'll be paying higher taxes when they're annexed to pay for things like better roads.
I meant for us.
What is the priority one response time for these guys who are getting sheriff service instead of city service right now?
Oh, it's bad.
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I know. Look, we're all.
Nobody knows.
Oh, it's.
We can guess.
I see the chief
Yeah.
making a gesture. Like,
It's bad.
is that gesture I don't know, or is it gesture it's terrible?
25.
Chief, can I ask you?
And while he's approaching, keep in mind if they're annexed, they also get a library card, which I think is a pretty great service here in our city.
Well, it is. We have an excellent library service and first-rate police. But if you live out there on Seal Road and you're outside the annexed area, how fast does the sheriff get there?
I don't know, sir. I don't know what their response times are.
Okay.
Just know that it's much longer than that time, and that's why a lot of those citizens would rather have us. That's a fair and even way. You're an attorney. We don't want to throw any numbers out there, but we're all aware it's much more significant. And to be fair to the sheriff's office, they're located at 11th and Guadalupe. Okay,
they've got a lot of area to cover. I think even at least back in the old days, they had a substation or a room in one of the Blackhawk facilities. They were able to sit there and do their paperwork and wait for calls.
Yeah, and when I was on the ESD board, we gave them a room to use overnight at times for that too. But it's a while.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I think we would want to highlight here is the amount of land that's actually still within the city limits, and so they're everything that's outlined in that kind of
fill-ins,
that kind of pale color represent those areas that are within our city limits and the areas that we probably want to encourage our developments to go into that location versus the extensions out further.
Jeremy, how do we? Okay, I love the way you nuancedly.
That's an adverb?
Nuisance.
No, I think he just coined a new word.
Yeah. So you said encourage the developers of that. What kind of carrots can we give for that infill for folks to actually go ahead and develop in the specific areas?
Well, I would say that our utilities are going to be one of those driving pieces. I would think that having the opportunity of being close to other things. So if there's goods and services that help to drive a development in because they want to be closer towards something, that's one of those advantage pieces. So for instance, with our zoning, and we're looking at development patterns within our community, making sure that folks have the ability to have those goods and services in within a closer proximity versus being way out may help to drive people into that location.
I guess I think to myself oftentimes about like Weiss High School, and the brave new world that it forced the city to go to by that high school, knowing fully well that it was going to drive from there as well, and that hopefully will never happen again. Us being forced in that situation, but something like that, like a catalyst for that, and so yes, do the infill, but if there's something. Yeah, well, just like what we did with Amazon, right? Like if there's something that's just monumental, substantial right there as well, we'd work with them regarding infrastructure and going with those ways. But you're saying in all these specific areas, we already have all designated infrastructure, even though those areas have not developed yet.
I would say that there's probably closer opportunities for infrastructure. They
That's
still may have to,
okay.
to extend utilities, and they still may have to do upgrades to those utilities to be able to get there. But it would be easier potentially to be closer in versus being further out and trying to navigate how do I get all of that utility in there.
Would we ever look at lift stations again, based on what we were told about how they're a pariah in society and America in general?
So one of the conversations that we're going through, and I'm going to step lightly because I'm going outside my realm, but one of the things that I mentioned before is that we're having the collaboration with the other developers, and so looking at ways to be able to meet the requirements for, say, the MUDs that are out there that we've consented to, and how does that infrastructure that they need get pulled in, and so that's where that those conversations are happening right now, to be able to collaborate on that so that the amount of impact might be a little less than everybody having something.
When you say the amount of infrastructure that they need, what do you mean by that? I'm talking water or sewer?
So again, I guess I was specifically thinking wastewater infrastructure. And so if numerous lift stations would be required, then you have numerous force mains that would be required that would all come in to a larger lift station until the wastewater plant is on board. And so having conversations, and again, I'm stepping out because Brandon's probably like,
no, that's all right.
But that's kind of the thing that we're talking about, is so finding ways to have those conversations.
And that's infrastructure that typically an MUD would fund. That would be the debt issued by the MUD district.
That would be part of the debt.
If there was no MUD, no MUD district, sorry, that's ATM machine, MUD district, MUD, that includes district. Who would fund those lift stations, those force mains?
At that point, the developer would have to.
It'd be on the developer, and then ostensibly rolled into the cost of the lot and the house and the mortgage and all that good stuff.
That's correct.
Okay.
So this is our last slide, but we're looking at still looking to have more of a conversation, looking at for a consultant to help us with doing some feasibility that we mentioned earlier. Feasibility study to look at the cost benefit analysis. Also looking at what would we want in a SPA. In those strategic partnership agreements, what would we want to see included in there? And so drafting up some things and bringing those to y'all for consideration. And then also just looking to City Council for further direction on what you would like.
Let me ask you a couple questions, more related to ETJ. It's okay, we know who you are.
Did you see the way he recovered though?
Perfect.
I didn't really.
So from an ETJ perspective, I know we've got something later on the agenda about someone wanting to disannex. But what rights do we have in the ETJ that we don't otherwise have? I understand we, as a city, have the right to regulate nuisances. I think it's 5,000 feet beyond our border, regardless of ETJ. I think in an ETJ we've got subdivision rights, and I'm very curious if we have an area that's disannexed from the ETJ, can they then go get a MUD on their own without our consent? What rights do we have?
Yeah, they could. And then, the only other thing I could think of is like CCNs, which is something that would be different, that we would hold the card on that throughout, our jurisdiction.
Yeah.
But
Okay. I think there was originally in the first proposal of the legislation that allowed disannexation, they were going to say, well, if you hold the CCN, then that's a reason you can deny the disannexation. But I believe that was removed. So
And there's still the ability. I know we talked about it at, we got drenched on out in Lockhart. That if in fact it's part of a master plan that's included with the text dot, which I think is a very unique, creature. Why would that even be in there right there as well? Then we have the ability we have some different powers with that. So when you were talking about consultation and discussion, that's something I'd be interested in hearing about that, because I mean that is a very interesting nuance to it, and I was really shocked by that. But I know that Williamson County's been looking at that in some certain areas, because like I said, there's some of our neighbors are dealing with some de-annexation issues that are really problematic.
that's a
for the
great
future.
that's a great point. I wonder if the text dot master plan is the strategy forward. I think in the past our CCN was our strategy. I'm not sure that's the best strategy anymore. Just one last thing I want to mention. We talked in the SPAs about limited purpose annexation, limited purpose districts. I have a funny feeling those won't be available to us much longer. So probably not good to rely on a strategy of that if the legislature may be reconsidering those options.
Just a couple of points real quick. I want to remind council that a request for a municipal utility district in the ETJ does require our consent. However, if we don't consent, they can still create the MUD. It just takes longer. It's the reason why they come to us for consent, because it short circuits the process. If we don't give our consent, then there's a process that we have to go through for purposes of negotiating services. They have to request it. We negotiate it. If we don't come to a conclusion on that within a certain time frame, they are free to go to the TCEQ and get their MUD. So they're still entitled to a MUD in our ETJ, even if we don't give consent. It just takes longer.
And I want to bring up with that to your point. I had a client this past session who was having a MUD forced on it on the city, and what was a good bull rock to that was that elected official in both in the House and the Senate required to get permission that we would not, I guess for a better lack of term, go against it, argue against actually having that MUD. And so it's important for us to have that relationship, or honestly make sure that our elected officials who represent us are on the same page, that they're not going to allow for someone to force a MUD on us. Because that, just like you said, I mean, it's an easy way. Yeah. TCEQ is interesting. And so if they're allowing for folks to just be able to go bypass from that and then go
Sure.
that route,
and if as long as they comply with the rules, they're going to be entitled to the creation of their municipal utility district. It just takes a little longer for it to occur. And I would point out that with respect to the new ETJ regulations, legislation, which authorizes folks to request and petition to be excluded from someone's ETJ, and then as long as they meet those petition requirements, we have a ministerial obligation to approve it. As a matter of fact, the legislation actually says if we don't do it within a certain amount of time, it just happens. It happens automatically.
What's the certain amount of time?
I want to say it's 30. It's the longer of 30 days after we receive the petition, or 45 days after it's considered by council, or something like that. It's
double.
Yeah, it's a fairly short period of time. But I would say that the legislature did exclude areas that have strategic partnership agreements from that legislation. So if a city has a strategic partnership agreement with an area in the ETJ, nobody within that area may request. Well, they can, but we would tell them no, right? but they're not entitled to the benefits of that legislation.
I can almost know who exactly created that
Yeah,
exception.
I guess I'm more confused on that. So I thought the spa was a function of mud consent, but you're saying you could have a spa over large tracts of land throughout the ETJ and
Yeah,
not
so
in a
no,
mud
no,
yet?
so to be clear, you're not going to have a strategic partnership agreement unless there's a mud involved. And so most, not the case with Pflugerville, but most cities attempt to negotiate a strategic partnership agreement at the time of the creation of the mud. It's part of the development agreement, it's part of the consent agreement, and they also enter into strategic partnership agreements at that time. And they usually also include language that gives cities the authority to charge higher wastewater and water fees once annexed to those areas, even though it's annexed in the city, so that the city will then have the funds to pay off those bonds that they acquire. If you don't do that at the very beginning of the time, you lose the ability to do that. So that's specific in the statute.
And I was surprised because most, I mean, at least in my experience, when you talk to these developers about it, they understand that.
Yeah,
Because,
no, they
you know, it's not like we should be having our citizens pay more than other people outside of our city.
Yeah.
Crazy concept how that would be.
Yeah, unless they've got higher bonds that need to be paid off that serve only them, right? And so that's the reason why that's in that legislation. But yes, you are correct, Councilmember Weiss. You wouldn't have a strategic partnership agreement unless you have a MUD.
Thank you,
This
Mayor.
is a great conversation.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, we're gonna move back to 2B, executive session, consultation with legal counsel regarding legal issues associated with the central wastewater treatment plant expansion, phase 1 project pursuant to chapter 551.071 Texas Government Code.
Adjourn.
All right.
No, I thought.